Hi, I'm Holly Loucas, agronomist with Pioneer, and I thought I'd take a minute today to talk about soybean emergence. I am at a field in Norfolk County. I'm on the sand, and it's May 30th today, and we are in a soybean plot that was planted on May 15th. So May in southern Ontario this year has been cool and wet. We planted this plot into good conditions. The soil was fit. It was a warm day. But we did know in the forecast that some cooler temperatures were coming. So after we planted this plot, we had several days of night temperatures were between 4 and 6 degrees Celsius, and daytime temperatures, in the mid-teens. We did get some 15, 16 days in there. But still, when you plant into sandy soils, one of the things that we are concerned about, especially when the temperature drops into that 4-degree range. It's not critical. We don't expect to see a ton of cold injury, but you are getting into that stage where the sand is going to cool and warm up faster. So that just creates a lot of temperature swings to where, the bean that's germinating and emerging is just going through a lot more changes in temperature than we would ideally like. So thought I'd come out to this plot today and take a look and see if there's any difference in soybean emergence in these cooler conditions. This is a good time to come and kind of take a look at those and determine if we have beans that are really good in these conditions or anything that looks like it might be a problem. We've also, I'm going to take some stand counts out here and just assess to make sure, all of the beans are germinating the way they should. They look good. I think the stand's pretty good. So at Pioneer, we rate our soybeans for emergence based on speed and strength of emergence in suboptimal temperatures. So anytime you look at those soybean emergence ratings on there and you're planting early and maybe the conditions in the next several days look like they're going to be cold, you can rely on those emergence scores to make your decision on which variety to plant. So I want to take a look at this soybean plot because it was planted in the middle of May, just before a week of cooler weather. To see if we had any cold injury or just some slower vigor on some of our soybean varieties. Happy to report they all look pretty good. Nothing really showing any injury here. As you can see, the beans are all up. They're growing really well and they look good. So even though we had some cooler temperatures and the beans took longer than we would have liked to emerge, it looks like we're going to have a good crop of beans going forward. So this is an interesting part of the field. This is right near the headlands, and it's a compacted area. And you can see that these beans here are just a lot slower to emerge than the rest of the field based on just being compacted in this area. It's often where trucks are loading and unloading and planter equipment is coming in. So just something to be aware of, that will actually... Not only does it compact the soil, but it will also keep the temperatures a little cooler longer. And I think these beans are just showing that a little bit slower emergence. So nothing too crazy here. They'll fill in fine and we'll get a good yield off it. But just something to be aware of when you're walking. We've moved from the sand to the clay today. And I am in Haldimand County now on clay that was planted in a soybean plot on clay that was planted just a day after the previous one on sand, and we're checking emergence on clay soil, so heavier soils. We talked about light soils previously. So there are more challenges when the soil gets heavier, just with more fine particles in it. Again, this spot experienced the same weather patterns we had, where, we had some nights that were 4 degrees, 6 degrees, and then daytime temperatures in the mid-teens for about a week. So the beans were in the ground in kind of some cool, wet conditions, not saturated, but definitely wet. So we're going to look at emergence on heavier ground. So mainly the main struggle when the heavier the soil gets is the fact that it's holding a lot more water, so seedling diseases can become a problem. So when we can put a seed treatment on that has a fungicide in it, that's definitely an advantage in these cool, wet conditions. So I'm going to take a walk and look through our different soybean varieties and see how they emerged based on in some cooler, wet conditions. So I'm walking along our plot area and just thought I'd give you a look at what we're looking for. I'm looking for, these beans are just starting to emerge, and so we're looking for beans that can really have a strong push as they come out of the ground. That's what we need for heavy soils. We need those beans to be able to push out of the ground aggressively, and this is a good spot right here. You can see this variety has just a little bit quicker emergence coming through the heavier soils. So when we see that, we pay attention to this, and we'll then keep an eye on this variety and see whether it's going to be one of our clay beans or not. So something we battle on the heavier ground is, again, just that tighter soil. It's a lot harder for the beans to push through, and they really have to use the strength they have and all the vigor they have to push up through just the heavier soils and just more water in there. The other things beans struggle with in these cooler conditions is because of the water content in the soil's going to take longer to warm up. It does take longer to cool down, but then it also is going to take longer to warm up as well. So it just takes them a little bit longer to get going. And that's why we see that we're at cotyledon stage here. And on the sand, beans planted at the same time are at their first leaf stage. So you just have to be patient when you're in some heavier soils and expect a little bit slower emergence. But these beans are all coming up. You can see them coming up down the row, and they'll fill in nicely this summer. The last thing I wanted to touch on is there is a difference in seedling vigor based on maturity. So any early maturity variety soybeans tend to come up out of the ground and get going faster than some of our later maturity beans, and that's just based on they're going to be planted in a slightly shorter growing season, so they need to get going, whereas a later maturity soybean has a bit more time in the growing season. So it's just interesting to see. On the right here is a 1.7 maturity bean that's 17Z39s, and on the left is 25A16, so a 2.5 maturity bean. So these guys in a couple weeks you won't notice the difference, but this is a nice stage to come out and just see that firsthand.